What is up, everybody? Day one of the Senior Bowl practice is in the books, man. And today, I just want to do a quick little video. So I did a live stream earlier, just kind of testing it out, see how this camera would work, and it worked pretty well. So did the audio. So I'm like, all right, let's jump back on it. Let's do a pre-recorded video. As you can see, it's late outside right now. It's a little bit different with the time difference. Kind of throws me off a little bit. It's earlier here than it normally is, so it throws me off. I feel like I have extra time for some reason. Post some sort of video, just giving some standouts from day one that I took away. Some of the key standouts. This isn't everybody. This isn't anybody that's had a good play or a guy that I was like, ooh, who's that guy? These are like my real standouts, I think, from the first day of practice. Now, keep in mind, for me personally, a lot of these guys, I'm learning of them for the first time. And typically, when I'm at home doing this, it's a much different setup because I'm taking notes, I'm watching film as I'm doing it, and it's really just me learning everything. And then it's kind of a slow build into the let's get into the draft stuff. But because we're here, it's like immediate. Here we are, we're jumping into it. And today I did my best to try to catch up with as many players as possible, get a first sense. But it's kind of cool because some of these dudes that I didn't know anything about, I had an opportunity for the first time to be like, what's it look like in person? I'm going to show some clips as we go through this. If it fits, I don't have that many clips because they didn't limit how many we can show. I do have some pictures though, so I'll just be throwing random stuff over the video as we're talking. But I'm going to try to make this video a little bit on the shorter side. All right, I don't want this to be 30 minutes long, but I just want to hit on some of the guys that stood out from day one, some of the guys that maybe didn't stand out, maybe some based on expectation. That's typically how I like to do it. And then what it's looking like going into day two, where we'll have more takeaways. And I really do think that day two is going to be a lot better. So I have a background on most of these guys. I tried to learn about all of these guys in some sort of way after day one. And then obviously this is kind of just a foundation that we built. Now, as soon as this is over, we're on a free agency and then the draft, and I have a really strong foundation of a sense for a lot of these guys, which is great. That's what I'm after. I'm after that. And then of course the ability to get some of the exclusive looks. But I really want to try to take advantage of the opportunity to see dudes in person. So let's get right to it. My focus was on the trenches because typically that's the part that's hard to see. In fairness, usually on TV, right, you can't really see the back end, but my focus was I wanted to see what it was going to look like O-line, D-line in person. I want to see pads hitting. I want to see people moving each other. And there's a lot of things on here that I didn't even include that should be brought up. My man out of Central Arkansas, I mean, there were guys just bringing the fight where he's like, even if they're not winning, you're still feeling an ability to get an edge, play through contact. And a couple of guys fit into that where it's like, okay, it wasn't maybe as much about the clean win or the clean swim. Like, so much of it isn't that, right? It's an ugly battle in the trenches, and it's just who's going to find a way to move the other guy. And I think I have a lot of takeaways from that. And then maybe tomorrow I'll focus more on the back end. Let's dive into it. This is in no specific order. Let's start it off with a guy that you all knew was going to be on here. I'm going to say probably a lot of these names wrong, so just be prepared for that. But I think his name's pronounced Deion Walker, the defensive tackle. Now, Deion Walker out of Kentucky had a fantastic day across the board. It was in terms of just being a disruptor. I mean, obviously he's massive. I didn't even think he was that big in person. I didn't know he weighed that much because he was such an athlete off the ball. Now, there was an example that they went at him. It was kind of like a duo run, got kind of turned sideways, felt like they created some movement. So as big as he was, positioning, entry angle felt like a little bit messy there. And I'm sure that's something that pops up is just consistency, especially when you're on a taller side like that. Consistency, placement, entry angles. But outside of that, there were some amazing reps that just caught everybody's attention. I mean, he completely overwhelmed a center at one point. He showed an ability to split gaps. And again, a guy at that size, that's not really normal. Back through my notes, there's a couple of guys I didn't even bring up in this video, editing this back, that I want to throw in here for some quick hitters. For example, my guy Mac McWilliams, who had a nice pass breakup out of UCF, playing in the slot on Pritchett, kind of worked the whip route really well, hung in his hip, broke it up. On the offensive line, defensive line, a couple of guys. First off, my guy Slater, who had a nice little win out of Sac State, playing left guard. An early win, RJ Oben, who also had a win on Emory Jones, the LSU offensive tackle. I would also have to point out Norman Lott. I mean, this guy had 2 wins in pass protection, one on the inside, one on Gray Zabel, if I have it correct, and that didn't happen very often, so I want to throw him in here as well. Jacob Bayer out of Arkansas State, he hemmed up TJ Sanders early on a rep out of Minnesota. My guy Josh Joyner. I mean, this was a player that I thought multiple times had wins. And, you know, when I was preparing for him the day before, I had some questions. But as you continue to watch, you're like, man, this guy has a real ability to win the top of the arc. I mean, he has the ability to stay bent, play with a lot of torque. And I thought it showed up today. I mean, I had a great clip of him getting a win. So on the defensive backside, man, a couple of guys here. First off, Dorian Strong had a nice pass breakup. He connected on a jam early on the rep and kind of shut down Pat Bryant on an underneath level 1 concept, got a pass breakup through the jam, which was beautiful. My man out of Western Kentucky, bro, he played excellent for his size. Undersized, a guy that's looked at 5'8", 180 pounds is what he measured in, and that's Upton Stout. He ended up having 2 pass breakups, one on a deep curl route, but he did it without really being handsy, which was awesome. And then, of course, Cone out of Western Michigan. Like, from a size perspective, he looks like he can translate to the NFL. Next player that I do want to point out here is going to be Hunter Wohler. I think the site pronounced his name out of Wisconsin. It's a linebacker. He did shine towards the end of practice because they were getting him more of their 7-on-7s and his coverage drops, and there was a lot of zone coverage drops here. And I thought the quarterbacks for the most part did a pretty nice job at reading through it. There was occasions where I was like, that's probably not a great read, but I thought they did a pretty good job. I thought that we saw Jackson Dart do a really good job there, but he was one of those players that really stood out because he was able to play fast as a linebacker. He was able to get to the flats really well. He had multiple examples in cover three, getting to the flat, closing distance. Magata Tulane did that once as well, but I thought the ball was just out late from Jalen Milroe. I thought he just held the ball too long. So it's cool to see guys fly around like that, and you could see the excitement from the coaching staff because they're flying around, they're making plays in zone coverage. You're going to give up receptions, but closing ground afterwards is everything. All right, how about a guy that stood out? South Carolina puts some defensive linemen out, man. Oh my goodness. Kennard at edge rusher, wearing the number 9. He had multiple edge sets in this game against the run, which is immediately what caught my attention is his ability to set the edge against the run in a stand-up position. And then also his ability to create some pressure showed up in teams as well. There's a lot of play action, there's a lot of boot, there's a lot of misdirection. So it's not as much straightforward pass sets in team drills through these situations. So the ability to constantly affect the quarterback through that is tough because there's a lot of redirect, and his ability to just make his presence felt a lot while also being very consistent at setting the edge, power player at the point of attack, displacing offensive linemen, playing behind the line of scrimmage. Ivy, who had a couple of run stops as well, he had a play that he completely just forced back into a cutback lane, which ended up picking up, I think, a minimal yardage, and I pointed that directly to Ivy. Look, this is a pretty loaded edge rusher class, and we'll see how top heavy it is. But if this is what the Senior Bowl looks like for edge rushers, there's a lot of good players, bro, and there's a lot of flexibility. There's stand-up guys, there's tweeners. But flip it over to the offensive side of the ball and give some love to the offensive linemen because look, some of these guys' expectation, like we had been through offensive linemen. I have watched through top offensive linemen in this draft because of our Draftaholics videos and or live streams on Roundtable, and I've seen a lot of these offensive prospects. So the top ones I kind of had an expectation, and it was really everybody else. It was looking for everybody else, and there was a couple of guys that I feel like maybe a little more under the radar. We'll see on a guy like Willie Lumpkin because, I mean, he looked like a people mover today. And I don't know where he's expected to go out of North Carolina, but he was constantly moving guys around. I thought he had a couple of good pass sets as well and one-on-ones. Willie Lumpkin constantly caught my eye as a consistent guard, as well as my man. I'm just going to continue to stick with this because I think he's done a good job. Carson Vincent. I want to see where this gets. I think Texas, I believe, A&T player. I believe that's where it's from. And dude, I mean, again, talk about creating a wall on that left side, working at left tackle, multiple good pass sets. He did have a loss I had in there to Kennard, but he was a people mover at the point of attack, and that consistency showed up because you're getting more outside zones, you're getting more stretch plays, and it was kind of just straightforward, like it's run a stretch left. But the ability to create a wall off of that was something that that left side of the line provided, and he was one of the guys where a couple of times we would springboard, and he was on that side of the field. So give him some love for that. That mainly shown up for me in team drills, what he was doing as a run blocker, and that's huge when everything's kind of simplified, I think, in an environment like this. Back to defense line, South Carolina puts out dudes. Have I said that already? I did? Okay. TJ Sanders, man. TJ Sanders out of South Carolina I thought was great. He showed, again, ability, quickness, ability to beat a center to his gap, kind of on the front side of the play side. Like, he didn't allow the center to reset on one of their wide zone run plays. He got on top of the block, not allowing him an opportunity to get over top of it. He also ran over Dellinger at one point. Maybe they make as many consistent plays, but made enough for me to be like, I'm going to write him on here. That's going to be Tim Smith out of Alabama. Looks like a big nose tackle, but this is one of those guys that are very capable of handling seemingly some two-gapping assignments, double teams at the point of attack. He's absolutely built for that. He also had a win on Frazier in pass protection. This is a player that just showed enough. He showed some quickness. He showed a little bit of slither for a big body. When traits like that pop, I gotta list them. I gotta keep an eye on it. Speaking of guys on the defense front, because that's what I paid attention to the most today. I'll probably change it up tomorrow. Shamar Stewart. Now he's got buzz coming in out of Texas A&M, of course, but Shamar Stewart I think lived up to all of the hype. Sack, edge on Frazier. He had a win on Jonas Savina. I don't know how to say dude's last name, who was a very high. I mean, I remember watching him before the football season even started out of Arizona. Man, he was able to create a soft edge on Savina playing right tackle. So came into this Savion Jones out of LSU. That was someone I wanted to see because watching his films, like, there's no way this guy's 290 that looks like that athletically. Things look a little bit messy, but athletically, those are some things that don't look like you can teach. And with that kind of length and that build, you can kick that guy to defensive end. He played all defensive end today. And Savion Jones created pressure again today, right? He showed the ability to get an edge, and it's like the 290. That's not supposed to work that way. It's going to be polished. It needs to take place. Things feel scrambled when you're watching him, but it's that kind of thing. It's that body type that's unique with that athleticism. That feels like a constant theme around these defensive line where maybe there's going to be polish that's needed, but, bro, you get guys like that, it's a problem. Speaking of, how about Peebles out of Virginia Tech? He probably had the most impressive stretch of plays that I think anybody had on the defensive line in the entire practice. I mean, he had back-to-back plays. They go to team drills, lights up 2 plays, tackles for loss. He's fired up. Everybody's like, "Oh my goodness, who is this guy?" People's like, "I'm here. Okay, I'm a little bit more stout, but I'm gonna make my presence felt. Great tackles for loss, get upfield, get us a zone stop, gets a gap stop off the backside, and then in the one-on-ones before that, he was effective. He was effective before that, getting one-on-one wins. So you put him in team drills, and then he's effective again. Because I don't think measurable-wise, it's going to blow anybody away, and it feels like sometimes you just have to do more. You have to be more productive in that spot, especially if you're not the best athlete. And from consistency and just production, he was one of the most productive players all day long. A couple guys that I didn't think stood out. Maybe that's for expectations. Maybe it's just in general. My man Princely out of Ole Miss, I wouldn't necessarily call him a standout from today, just because the expectation, bro. He's looked at as a first round pick. I thought the way that he went out today was not bad. I mean, he did draw a holding call. He tried to work a spin move in team drills, get under pads, slipped and fell. It just wasn't dominant. I'm not going to say he played poorly. Honestly, for most players, he probably had a positive game. But for the most part, the athleticism showed, the wiggle showed, the traits showed, but it didn't come through in terms of enough production for me to be like he was a standout. So I feel like I was a little bit let down just because I want to see the production when you're that highly touted. But in terms of the athleticism, it definitely popped when watching him, especially the flexibility. And that's always been a case with Princely, is he's got that kind of athleticism. I know that about him. Speaking of edge rushers, how about guys like Josiah Stewart? I thought Josiah Stewart had a really strong day. Right before we got out there, I was watching Josiah Stewart from Michigan. I watched his Texas game this morning because I was like, let me kind of refresh myself on what this guy can do. Josiah Stewart, I like this film, and I was like, okay, there's limitations. He looks pretty stiff, but I like the way that he plays a run. There's a lot of consistent hand usage, which is great. And he's one of those guys where it's like, may not be the most crisp wins all the time, but it feels translatable. That this is consistent. This process, the way that he wins is going to be consistent. And I think he showed that today. Like, Josiah Stewart went out there and had multiple wins. He had a win on Connerly, one of the best tackles in this entire class, to be honest with you, or definitely at the Senior Bowl. So for him to go out there and get a win there, working into one-on-one drills, was like, okay, this translates. Like this kind of way that he plays is going to translate, and I'm pretty confident in his run defense already. Like there's things are going to add to it, but a guy that shows that kind of ability, it's not that he's like a people mover, but he's really rock solid. He's really rock solid, and I think that's through the technique that he plays with as a run defender specifically. So pretty well-rounded piece there. I think it's going to be limited how upside his can get, but for you to be consistent day one means a lot. I'm going to say Clay Webb out of Jacksonville State let me down maybe a little bit today as well. I didn't know a dang thing about him. I just thought he was probably one of the more inconsistent pass protectors that I had the entire time. I would say Restrepo out of Miami. And again, not that he's a poor player or something like that, because that's not true. And maybe he left a little bit out there, but for the most part, I think the reason I put him here is because my concerns, I felt like, at least in day one, they were a little bit verified. Like, I didn't feel that he would constantly maintain separation. And I felt that showed up again today, where you allow guys to recover in coverage. So it's like, okay, where does the route tree fit in? So I looked at him as a level 1, level 2 route runner. I think that's clearly there, athletically speaking. And I think a big reason for that is he doesn't really lose speed out of breaks. Like that showed up. He doesn't lose any kind of momentum in and out of cuts, and that's a tough thing to do. That opens up a ton of flexibility over the middle because you're constantly creating separation without having to slow down. That's a handful to deal with. The problem is it's that recovery aspect that I think is there, that he allows guys to get back into the play, and then also I didn't feel like there was a ton of suddenness. Everything kind of felt fluid, kind of one pace, and that was another knock that I had on him. So maybe I need to see more. That's very possible. But when we prepared for a wide receiver video, he was not my top 5. I felt like he played at one pace. I watched him do a comeback route that felt very one-paced. So it's not that it's not fluid. It's not that they can't separate. I just think route tree wise, from what I've seen so far, I would assume there will be limitations there. But Jalen Royals, on the other hand, I think made me pretty excited because it's not that he cooked. I think he had like 2 receptions. He had a double move that he got over top, and then he also had a speed out route. And for me, again, route tree matters for all these guys. It matters for Jaden Higgins. It matters for all these guys. But the big thing there was, for me as a route runner, I was concerned at just how he was going about the process, allowing people to jump on routes. And I don't know that there was enough there for me to be like, oh yeah, he's going to be fantastic. But he had a lot of the great traits, and it was like, what's this route tree going to look like against better competition? And at least on day one, limited sample size, look good. The speed out routes, everything, make that crisp. Very good with his footwork in terms of there wasn't a lot of false steps, I felt, when I was watching him. I'd say Mike Green, again, maybe more on the down low. Some people were talking about him as a first-round pick out of Marshall. I think that's maybe on the table. I think as of now, I wouldn't guess that he'd be a first-round pick. It stood up one point in practice today, kind of tried a long arm move. There was like no speed to power, kind of just went down on the play. And I think things like that will show up with Mike Green. It's just kind of the way that he's built. I mean, he's a freaky athlete, but in terms of the build, obviously there's concerns there. And I don't think that what he showed today was like, oh man, he's going to overcome these. I think some of those just look kind of legitimate. So I need to see more of Mike Green, but at least as of now, limited sample size, I wasn't the most impressed. Wyatt Milliam, I think I'm saying his name right, out of West Virginia. He's another guy that I'd throw in there as well because, again, Wyatt had buzz. There was talk about him being one of the top tackles and him being a riser. Again, I kept him out of my top 5. I didn't see that necessarily at the time. That could change. Things can still change. It's on a push-pull move, hit him with a spin move, and he lost. There was just too many losses in there for me to feel great about it. Now, I think there could be position flexibility, so that'll be something to keep an eye on. And I like the way that he plays the game. Again, pass protection just wasn't consistent. So for me to think like top 5 tackle, I didn't get there. However, I did get there with Gray Zabel. And Gray Zabel is a guy that build-wise, we did it on Draftaholics. I was like, I think he looks like a guard. And it was like, well, his size, I thought he played like a guard. I thought he had a skill set to go to guard. And I think today, on practice, his ability to move around the line showed up, and I thought he had one of the best days of anybody. He was a finisher. He was tough as nails. He's from North Dakota State. Those guys, I mean, it may take a second to transition like it did with Cody Mao, but look at him 2 years later. He's awesome. So showing flexibility already of what I thought he could become, I think that this player is going to be in a pretty good spot. It may come out a little bit slow as well, but again, for guys like this, it's all about stepping up in that competition. He's shown ability to recovery in pass pro, and the inside flexibility is everything. Recovery is huge, because you're going to lose reps and stuff like this. Like, that's what Emory Jones showed out at LSU. Showed an ability to recover, get back into the play. For me, Landon Jackson was, again, a little bit on the disappointing side, but I don't know that there was enough here. I just didn't get blown away. I wouldn't say there's enough there for me to be like, man, I thought he was poor today. I just didn't get blown away by anything. Like, obviously he's a big man and he's a little bit tight, and you feel that as a pass rusher, but his ability to get under pads was showcased. I mean, he looked like a good athlete. I think the length is going to be huge for flexibility, but in no way today that I feel like there was ever a stretch where I walked away thinking that he was dominant. A couple little linebacker notes here from me. Knight, I was taking notes on all these guys, so I got so many more notes. We'll have to do more live streams, but Knight, who, we had the interview with, which was fantastic, by the way, super long linebacker, and he was a guy that, like, for blitzing, I'm like, this is going to have some potential. And then he had a sack when he was going through team drill, so that was massive. But my concern is going to be his ability in pass coverage. Like, I think there's going to be limitations there, and you could see it in one-on-ones. Like, R.J. Harvey had a nice little win there, working pass routes. Donovan Edwards had a nice win. He just dropped the ball, but he had a nice win. He showed that he'd get open. More fluid as route runners, I think he may struggle to stick with a little bit more. It feels like it's not going to be as smooth in the lower body. It's going to be more straight lines, take away flat routes, take away anything underneath. And again, this is from a very small sample size. And then Kaiser. I think Kaiser, athletically, just watching him do drills, you weren't loving how much depth that he was getting, right? You weren't loving kind of that lower body quickness, but he was flexible, his ability to sink, get in and out of cuts. When he was comfortable, he did a really nice job, man. It was very fluid, and you could understand that put in the right role, there's going to be some success there for Kaiser at the next level. He kind of feels like he could be an effective special teamer as well, just by his skill set. So for me, that's kind of where I'm at with it, man. That's really my main takeaways, my top players from today. I think I'll hit on everybody that I wanted to for this episode, and I'm going to leave it there, man. We'll have to revisit this. The tight end position is looking pretty good. I mean, Taylor went out there. He looked like an amazing route runner. And there was one more guy I want to make note of, Anthony Belton. I mean, this was a player that just looked super solid all day long. He was nasty. Got called for a holding for throwing one of the Virginia Tech defensive linemen to the ground, but that's what you got all day long. I mean, he was a person that could just create movement downfield as well. I thought he was one of the more consistent. There was pop reps within his game as an offensive tackle. He also has the body type that looks like it's going to translate. And a guy like Trevor Etienne, I mean, he looked athletically and also in terms of vision and play speed, looked like he was going to translate pretty quickly as well, that there was traits there that in time could be very effective in the NFL. And I thought Etienne showed that as a receiver and also as a back just by some of the cuts that he made. So two guys had to start to throw in here really quickly. That's what I loved about him. Again, back to traits. That dude could run. He was natural ball skills. I think that showed up. Just small sample size, but the traits showed up immediately. I liked Elijah. I felt like he bounced back, got better after a really tough rep, and it was like he's finding ways. I think this is a pretty good tight end group as well. I mean, my man out of Alabama, I think he's a good tight end as well, like ability to play with some route contact balance and continue to push vertically. I think it's a pretty solid group for tight ends this year, and it's one of the deeper groups, at the top as well. It's like one of the heavier groups at the top. Like, Fannin didn't really impress, I don't think, today. He also had a drop. Didn't really do much outside of that, but it's also a little bit understandable because I don't think that was his skill set. Was like, man, he's a super separator. He's got a lot of wiggle one-on-one. Like, that's not his game. That's not who he is. He's a freak that can push vertically. He's that. That wasn't really his game. So we'll see if that improves. But overall, like, I think a lot of the tight ends kind of play to form, and it's a good tight end room. But I'm going to leave it there, man. Those are my takeaways from day one of the Senior Bowl. I will see y'all back for day two. and we'll do something different potentially, but I just want to get something out there. I appreciate y'all joining, man. Hopefully you enjoyed the clips. Follow us on X. Follow me on X. Dose of Dion, at zero dose of Dion, because I'm gonna have a lot of stuff going up over there that doesn't go on YouTube just because it doesn't make sense content wise. So if you want like big things happening while things are happening, that's the place to follow. And then of course Roundtable for putting this all together, man. We got 4 creators here live. That's why I'm outside. I'm in Mobile right now because of them. So shout out to them. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.